Hey guys, this is Dan Wolak from Coal Cracker Bushcraft. I'm out here at the yurt today getting ready for an upcoming trapping season here in Pennsylvania, getting some stuff situated. And I also was playing around today a little bit with flint and steel, and it got me thinking to do a video just a little bit more in depth on flint and steel. I noticed two things when people first start out. Number one, they sometimes have a hard time getting a good spark off the steel. And number two, once they end up getting a good spark, they have a hard time understanding how to get that spark directed towards whatever charred material they're using. So I'd like to set out my stuff. I have all different things with me today. Just briefly go over some of my flint and steel that I have, some of my kits I have put together with that, talk about the basics of getting a spark, and then we'll talk about a little bit of advanced techniques as far as if you're using natural char or if you're using char cloth, and how to go about changing up your technique a little bit to accommodate that charred material. So stay tuned, I'm going to get set up and we'll get started. Okay guys, so what I did was I laid out some different things here just to talk briefly about. I don't want to get in too much detail because I want to talk more about technique, but I just wanted to show everybody how many different options we have here and how simple flint and steel technology can actually be. So you can go out and you can make a steel striker. You have a forge. You can also get just a cheap high carbon steel file, heat it up red hot, quench it in water, and for the majority of the time that'll throw an okay spark. But like I said, you can hand forge them, you can buy them from shops, or we all should have a good high carbon steel knife on our hip at all times. So this takes care of our steel. All we would need is a hard rock. Now, of course, flint and steel, you're going to think flint right away. So carrying a piece of flint, this weighs nothing. It's easy to throw in your belt pouch or throw in your pack along with the steel, and it takes up no room whatsoever. But just walking out here to the yurt today, picking up just a small piece of stone and checking it. I knew this was quartz, so I didn't even need to check it. But if you're not sure, and you just take your striker and give it a whack or two, you'll see the sparks right away coming off, and you know that rock's hard enough. Okay? What I have here is just some kits, just to show how small and compact you can actually pack this stuff up. This is just a small leather pouch you can use your flint and steel in. This container, I actually have some charred material in. Same with this. Now this is a brass container. This has a burning lens actually on it, so I wouldn't be able to put this in a fire, but this does a great job holding any type of charred material and a flint and a steel. All this in a very small container. Or you can just take something like this old shoe shine container, burn it off, and you have yourself a nice tin that you can char in and hold all your supplies. So when we talk about flint and steel, of course we need some type of charred material to ignite. So there's some different options there, and that's when we get a little bit further in this video what I wanted to talk about. Many people, when they first start out, you're going to start with some type of cotton material. You're going to char it in a fire, which I did a video on in the past, and that is going to be what you're going to throw your sparks on. It'll ignite, then you'll have a hot burning ember you could place inside a bird's nest and blow it to flame. You can also use natural materials such as punkwood, cattail, or any kind of pithy plant. And that's what I have actually. I have some punkwood and some cattail in this tin here, and I carry this more with my 18th century equipment, but I just wanted to show you guys as an option, that is. So, well, what's the difference and what are different in techniques? Well, we're going to go through them shortly, but one big difference you need to remember is any type of charred cloth, okay, is going to be a little bit more stable in the sense that you can manage it with your fingers and move it around a little bit more readily, and it's not going to break apart as quickly as something like charred cattail or punkwood. That stuff's going to really break apart. You're not going to be able to hold that too well. So that's where we need to have two different ideas and techniques of how to ignite these materials. So I'm going to get the camera zoomed in a little bit closer. We're going to just grab just a piece of flint and one of these strikers, and we're going to talk about good technique and just a few tips and tricks on flint and steel. Okay, so let's first talk about technique. What are we actually trying to do? What we're actually trying to do is we're taking our stone and we're scraping our striker against our stone, okay? We're removing material from our striker, okay? It doesn't have to be extremely hard to the point that we're smashing our rock apart, okay? We might get small chips out, but that's okay. And it can't be so light that we have no power behind it because we're not removing any material. So you need to find that happy medium. Okay. The second thing is you don't need to muscle this. You don't need to use your whole arm to do this. Just a flick of your wrist with a little bit of pressure behind it, okay, will get sparks. When I do this, okay, or when you try to do this, you want to try to start by using the whole face of your striker and driving harder towards the end. So imagine you're starting out just lightly, striking here and dropping in harder towards the end. Just like that, okay? So that's the first thing you want to work on. You also want to work on, which we're going to talk about why we want to work on this, is holding our striker and striking it with our rock, okay? When we do that, we're driving our rock downward across the entire face of our striker in a downward motion, not too light, not too hard, right in the middle, okay? So there's two different techniques. Now, why do we need two different techniques? Well, let's look at it. So if we take some charred cloth, okay, right here, some things happen. Number one, it is somewhat manageable. I can manage this around, I can put this on top of the rock, I can pinch it, I can let it go, and it's not really falling apart, okay? So it's a little bit more stable of char than a natural material char. So what helps a lot of people who are just starting is to place char cloth on top of your rock and strike the rock with your striker, okay? This is going to give the closest amount of room between your spark and your char cloth, keeping the spark the hottest, of course. The more it travels, the more it's going to cool. That's why the sparks don't linger around for any amount of time. So by putting your char cloth towards the end of the rock and giving it a nice, easy blow like that, okay, you can see your char cloth will ignite. Now what we need to remember is when we strike this way, our striker to our rock, most of our sparks are going to come upward. When we strike our rock onto our striker, because we have downward motion with the rock, most of our material is getting removed, getting pushed downward. Now why do we need to know that? Well, when we use natural material and natural char, such as this, all right, not a lot of people, especially people who are just starting, have enough finesse to be able to hold this and strike. Okay, what happens is, as we start to work, you can see that's just starting to crumble away. Okay, so they end up getting it here, it's crushed apart, it's an absolute mess. So what we want to do is we would want to take our tin, okay, and use our rock against our steel to throw our sparks down into our tin. Now sometimes with natural material it takes a little bit more to get a spark to work, and as you can see I'm just turning my rock to get a good sharp edge. And once I see something that's ignited in there, just going to pull it out. And I would place this into my tinder bundle. Now as you can see, it took a little bit longer to get that started than it did the charred cloth. But of course this we can get out in the woods. We can go out and continuously collect. Sooner or later we're going to run out of cotton material to actually make charred cloth. But charred cloth would, in my opinion, be a more reliable source of char than anything else. But of course, if you have your technique down, either are going to work just fine. So what we need to remember is that we need to learn just finesse when striking our striker against our rock. We also need to know how to strike our rock against our striker and when to use each technique. Now if we talk about our knife, which I talked about earlier, okay, one thing I see people do is they'll take their knife and they're whacking their knife. Now we have an open blade that should be extremely sharp if we take care of our knives, and we're swinging this around, and that could be quite dangerous. So the best technique for that, of course, would be either to lay your char on something dry, or again, you can open up your char tin, put your knife right down to the bottom, and then strike our knife right down into the tin. If we have charred cloth, and it's not natural char, we can just lay a piece just right on our working area, pin it with our knife, strike it, and then we have our charred material that way. And that's going to keep us most safe when using a knife to ignite any type of charred material. Alright guys, this was Dan Wolak of Coal Cracker Bushcraft. They were just some quick tips and some technique on using flint and steel. You got to work with this just like anything else. And I always look at flint and steel, especially when you use natural materials, or even if you use a thinner type of cloth to do this. It really is a gateway for somebody who's just learning friction fire to work with bird's nests and learn how to blow a bird's nest to flame before you start getting that fine dust and them little cherries that we get from bow drills and hand drills. And this will really close that gap, because nothing's worse than when somebody first starts learning friction fire and they get that first coal and they maybe not be able to blow it to flame. So practice with your flint and steel. It is a good reliable source. It's a renewable source if you have a magnifying glass. Our knife, you're never going to wear the back out. I can almost guarantee that, unless you're smashing it with a boulder for some reason. But we have the back of our knife. If you have a magnifying glass and one fire, you can make char as many times as you would need, and it's a great renewable resource. So thanks for joining me. I have a lot more videos in the works, so stay tuned to my channel. If you haven't subscribed, please click below and subscribe now. This was Dan Wolak, Coal Cracker Bushcraft. Thanks guys.